Can you reinsert Alshon Jeffrey or George Kittle back into your lineups in their first games back? What Patriots pass catchers might be sneaky Week 12 starts? And does Cleveland feature two must-start running backs in the first week of the FPC and main event playoffs? Plus, the 2019 FFPC main event regular season runner-up Erik Wahl joins us to talk about Bo Scarborough, why he's loaded up on tight ends on his roster, and much more. We've got a great show for you. Dave Gerzak is here. I'm Erik Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
Your hands, everybody, if you got what it takes, because I'm KRS and I'm on the mic and premieres. Hardcore hip-hop.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now listening to the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com with your hosts Erik Balkman and Dave Gerzak. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for football analysis from the best fantasy players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Erik Balkman and Dave Gerzak.
With the master rhymer, that's the lead behind the video rapper. You know the top rhymer, tapper.
Thanks so much, Rob. Greetings and salutations to all of the Balkaholics and Gerzak and addicts tuning in this evening or whenever you're streaming this later. Welcome to the latest episode of the HSFF Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. I'm your slightly above average host, Erik Balkman. My co-host is the patron saint of fantasy football, Dave the Dizzle Gerzak. Coming up on tonight's show, we're going to give you the latest on the injury statuses for both Brandon Cooks and Mohamed Sanu, plus the 2019 FFPC main event regular season runner-up Erik Wahl is going to join us to talk about why starting Tyler Lockett this week might be problematic for him, his thoughts on Jacob Hollister versus Noah Fant in Week 12, and much more. Shout out to everybody in the chat room right now. You can post questions you might have in there at HSFF Hour, at Erik Balkman, at David Gerzak is where to reach us on Twitter, Facebook.com/HSFF Hour, 347-426-3682. If you want to give us a call at 347-GAME-OVA. If you have any questions for us, now is the time to send them in to highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. Our producer and mutual friend Rob, our audio engineer, and my best friend Bryce are going to do their best to get to all the questions, tweets, and emails in the fantasy feedback segment coming up later on in the last segment of the show. Dave, exciting stuff around the FFPC today. Big announcement came out. If anybody saw the e-newsletter that went out to everybody, a couple of big announcements in there, because not only is there a big change to the main world-famous FFPC playoff challenge this year, there's another playoff challenge that is going to be offered through us as well. What can you tell us about those?
That's really exciting. We partnered with Football Guys again. We are offering a $35 entry playoff challenge. It's the same exact format as you're used to. $100,000 grand prize, 10,000 team maximum, so it's a pretty massive contest. And then for the main playoff challenge, it's still $200 to enter with a $500,000 grand prize. I mean, that's pretty much record shattering. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anything even remotely close to it. So 6,500 team cap there. 150 teams are the most any person can buy in either of the two contests. And it's really exciting. I mean, we're pretty stoked for it. People are already entering. You don't really get to put your lineups in until the playoff teams are determined.
Right.
But it should be really fun playoffs this year. So as everyone makes their way through their league playoffs, keep the playoff challenges in mind.
Rules and scoring format is the same as last year, correct?
Yep, identical.
Identical there, and remember that it's a $300,000 prize pool in the $35 entry. It's a $1.12 million prize pool in the world famous FFPC playoff challenge, and double points in the Super Bowl, something that's fairly unique too. We're going to have that featured again next year. You can sign up for those right now at myffpc.com. So definitely give that a look-see, and also give a hear would it be, because it's an audio podcast. But the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown was brand new again this week with Tom Greenwald, the guy who has been on these airwaves before, the guy who's been very, very successful in the regular season, former Football Guys Players Championship regular season points champ. He took third place in the FFPC main event regular season points race this year. On that program, we talked a lot about prepping your teams for the playoffs, what you need to do for the playoffs, and then sort of some league winners. We get into that discussion, too. Might get into some league winner discussion on tonight's program. rotoviz.com/podcast. Check it out. It's on Apple Podcasts as well as the Blue Wire Podcast Network. All right, let's get into it tonight, Dave. We're going to skip the first thing, which I think, we talked about previously on the show, so we don't need to talk about that because it's not news. Let's talk about the Eagles. Doug Peterson said that Alshon Jeffrey, quote, is trending in the right direction for the game against the Seahawks. This according to Dave Zingaro on Twitter. Nelson Aguilar, who is battling a knee issue, is in the same boat as Aguilar was supposed to practice again today. Jeffrey, if you remember, sat out last week. Dave, the Seattle secondary is the Legion of Boom. It is not. And it's been pretty rough this year. Only 3 teams have allowed more passing yards per game this season than Seattle secondary. So you look at Alshon Jeffrey, this is a juicy matchup for him. Would you trust putting him back in your lineup right away, or are you looking for other options here?
Well, if he's active, I wouldn't mind putting him in there. He's probably like a wide receiver 3-ish range, I would say.
Top 35 guy this week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
An ankle injury, it's not the same as I'd rather have a guy coming back from an ankle injury than someone coming back from a hamstring.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that.
Soft tissue injuries, not the ankle. You just tape it up and come on, let's go. You should be fine.
Right. Yeah.
So if he's feeling good in warm-ups and he's got it all taped up, I don't see him re-aggravating it, and I think he could actually have a decent game.
Sometimes I think with those bigger receivers, when it's an ankle or a knee or something like that could be kind of bulky, I'm not really concerned with it because they tend to win at the point of the catch.
Yeah,
they can use their body a little bit more, yeah.
Yeah, especially.
I think I have him in one league, and he's on my bench right now. I might have to switch that out before Sunday morning. NFL Network's Ian Rappaport has reported that it's not looking good for Juju Smith-Schuster to play this week against Cincinnati, and it's really bad for Pittsburgh because James Conner has already been ruled out. You're looking at James Washington and Deontay Johnson as the starting receivers catching balls from Mason Rudolph. You look at the Steelers' running back situation. Obviously, Jalen Samuels is the play here. Do you have any interest in Benny Snell as a flex? Do you have any interest in James Washington or Deontay Johnson as a flex? Normally, I wouldn't ask this, but you're talking about going up against an 0-10 team this week.
If I was desperate, I would look at those guys. And, it is Week 12. There's quality teams on bye, so you might have to look at James Washington or Deontay Johnson. I would not be interested in Benny Snell. I think Jalen Samuels gets to rock and does really well.
Yeah. It's funny because I was listening to I can't remember what podcast I was listening to, but the Pittsburgh coaching staff seems to really like, and the front office seems to really like Benny Snell as much as they like Jalen Samuels. They must be seeing something different in practice because Jalen Samuels totally looks like the more electric player, the more dynamic player when they get out on the field together.
Yeah, and for PPR leagues, from our purposes, he's a great pass catcher too, so I really like Jalen Samuel.
Let's move on and talk about Mohamed Sanu. Because this is a guy I was really excited about coming into this week. And all right, so this is how the narrative sort of took off this week. Tom E. Kieran, who is a reporter for NBC Sports Boston, said that Sanu not only is probably going to be out this week, he's going to be out several weeks. You look at what he did against Philadelphia last week. Again, a pretty good matchup, and he could not get much done. He didn't practice the last 2 days. He was going to try to plan to practice. I believe he did practice today, if I'm remembering correctly. But, Dave, this is weird because Tom Brady said, the offense needs to step up. We need to be making more plays out there. The disparity between points allowed and points given up or something like that for New England, it was insane. Like how good their defense has been.
Right.
And their offense just simply is not putting up points on the board. This could be a get-right game against Dallas this week. But now you might not only might you not have Mohamed Sanu, you might not have Philip Dorsett. And all of a sudden you're looking at N'Keal Harry and Jacoby Myers out there running with Julian Edelman. How do you sort of handicap this for fantasy? Is Edelman the only guy you're looking at playing even if Sanu is active?
Well, it doesn't sound like Sanu is going to be active. I would have no interest in playing Sanu. I don't think I could start Jacoby Myers or any of those guys. Maybe just Edelman. I think James might get a few more looks, and they're going to rely on the running game more.
And obviously no love for any of the tight ends there, correct?
No, in fact, New England was even talking about bringing back Antonio Brown a little bit. So, that just shows you how dire and desperate it is right now.
Did I tell you this wasn't my conspiracy theory, but the conspiracy, okay, so I'll bring this up. I brought this up on the show with Leo and Balky, which you can listen to weekday afternoons here in Northeast Wisconsin. You've seen Antonio Brown tweet before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Little unhinged, little off the rails, very, very folksy, very conversational tweets.
Yeah, he's a grandmaster level whack job.
Did you see his tweet that of the apology to Mr. Kraft?
Yeah, I saw it. I kind of skimmed it, but yeah.
Okay. Did that strike you as something that Antonio Brown typed out himself or copy and pasted?
Yeah, I didn't. Again, I don't recall all the words exactly, but I could see where you're getting.
Very apologetic and did not sound like his voice at all.
Yeah, maybe he finally gave his Twitter login to his agent, like he probably should have. And his agent should change the password.
Do you know who one of the first people was to like that tweet?
No.
It was Mr. Tom Brady.
Nice.
Do you think that Tom Brady told Antonio Brown, tweet out an apology, this is going to make the optics look a lot better so we can re-sign you? And obviously that doesn't seem to be the case, but that's my conspiracy theory that I saw on the internet.
Well,
and I don't think it's far off.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, hey, there's stranger stuff going on in Washington right now, so who knows?
Right. New England is a 6-point favorite at home against Dallas this week. I'm with you. I think it's Edelman. I think it's White. I think I am playing Michelle in one league, too, as a flex. I don't feel great about it, but beggars can't be choosers, as they say.
That's so true.
All right, George Kittle. Let's talk about him. He's missed the last couple of weeks. It might come to an end this week. He's expecting to play in the big Sunday night tilt against Green Bay in Santa Clara. This according to ESPN.com. Kittle practiced yesterday. He said it went really well. Definitely a good step in the right direction, and the goal is definitely still Green Bay. Dave, now George Kittle, you think about what he's accomplished this year. You think about the other options at tight end. I think this is a guy, and my buddy Kurt would agree, you got to get him in there right away if he is active.
Yeah, I think you even, unless the news is extremely negative Sunday morning, I think you'd even take the chance on Kittle missing. If you don't even have a clear directive, it sounds to me like, okay, how could Kittle, first of all, he practiced Friday, so that's good news, and how could you not possibly, as George Kittle, not come and play in this huge Sunday night game? You got to be out there. The stars come out on the night, those primetime games. Bear
this in mind, too. Emmanuel Sanders, we don't know if he was going to go. Deebo Samuel was actually in the non-contact jersey this week in practice for the Niners, too. Though both of those receivers are officially listed as questionable. Apparently, Dante Pettis not taking his job seriously enough, and he's been banished to the bench there. There's not a whole lot, and there's not a whole lot else. You know, I mean, Kittle, you're right. He has to be out there. Packers, for the first month, maybe month and just over the first month of the season, maybe the first 5 weeks, they did a really good job defending the tight end. Then that Philadelphia game came with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. And they couldn't find them at all in the secondary. And they got torched by the tight end, and they've been getting torched by the tight end a lot this season. So I think Kittle is a must-play. I like
Green Bay. I get plus the points a little bit this week. There's so many injuries on the Niners. I feel like they're going to have a problem.
I totally agree. Now, I'm a rational guy, okay? And
I'm a big Packers fan.
And I am a big Packers fan. I think they're going to pull the upset. So I would actually moneyline this if I
yeah, I don't even see it as a big upset, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, they are banged up right now. The Niners are really, really banged up.
Breed is, I think,
Breed is doubtful. He's not going to play. Joe Staley just had finger surgery. And you look at what I don't want to get into the whole non-fantasy aspect of this, but the Niners the last 3 weeks with Jadeveon Clowney going up against them and Chandler Jones a couple of times. Those tackles have been drowning in pass rush. I mean, they just cannot protect Garoppolo. It's forced them into some bad decisions. So,
Garoppolo's put up fantasy points at least.
And I was talking to again, I don't want to devolve this conversation. Mark Willard, who works at KNBR in San Francisco in the Bay Area, he covers the 49ers out there. And I was talking to him. Garoppolo's putting up some pretty good numbers. But these interceptions, and he's throwing almost interceptions too. Now for fantasy, we don't necessarily care about it as long as you're going to throw for 440 yards and 4 touchdowns. We're going to look the other way on these interceptions. And he brought up with me, he's like, who used to do that all the time? Put up insane fantasy numbers? Brett Favre, back for the Packers, where he'd make those 2 questionable decisions a game. Normally he got caught with it, but he makes some other insane plays to make up for it. Now Garoppolo's not doing that, but he is doing enough for your fantasy rosters. And I actually like Garoppolo as a start this week too.
Boy, that's a lot of words, boss.
Sorry, I've been talking about Packers.
Talking fast tonight.
We've been talking about Packers-Niners all week, so I'm sort of dialed into that right now. Hey, we got Erik Wahl, the runner-up in the FFPC main event coming in the regular season coming up here in just a minute. One other thing I wanted to get to is talk a little bit about the Rams wide receivers. Brandon Cooks, no longer in the league's concussion protocol. He was actually practicing this week while still in the protocol. I didn't know you could do that, but apparently you could. Now, this is his 5th concussion of his career. It's the 2nd one he's had this season. But apparently he's going to be playing this week, and it sounds like Robert Woods has passed his personal issue, whatever that was. So you're looking at a full-fledged stable of receivers catching passes from Jared Goff on Monday night. What a Monday night treat that's going to be with the Baltimore Lamar Jacksons taking on the Rams, and it looks like the Rams are going to be at full strength. Would you play all three of these receivers? Did you feel good about that, starting them all as, say, like a top 30 option? Cooper Kupp for sure, obviously. I guess I'm more alluding to Cooks and Woods.
I'd prefer to play somebody else, I think, over Cooks and Woods if I could.
Kupp's locked in, though.
Yeah, I would play Kupp, and I think that actually those guys coming back is really good news for Kupp. Distracts the coverage, even though he's a slot guy.
He had a 0 the other week. Could you believe that?
Yeah,
it's just insane.
I was witnessed it.
Oh.
and had him on a couple.
Yeah,
times.
that sucks, man.
Yeah, that's
I'm
all right.
sorry.
Just dynasty teams, but still.
So I don't really care about the dynasty.
I'm just saying, I can afford it a little bit in dynasty. Whereas if it was Kentucky or whatever, I'd be really pissed. Because it's just more limited.
Yeah. No, I get it.
So.
I get it. No, for sure. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring in our guest tonight here on the HSFF Hour. Not only is he a best-selling author, internationally renowned graffiti artist, and motivational speaker, he also put his stamp on the 2019 FFPC main event by placing second in the contest regular season. You can check him out at his website at theartofvision.com. Follow him on Twitter at Erik Wahl. Please welcome into the HSFF Hour, Mr. Erik Wahl. Thanks for hopping aboard the show tonight, man. Appreciate it.
What's up, boys? Thanks for the invitation. Honored to be here. Fun to talk shop, talk a little football.
Yeah, it's very exciting stuff. Now, before we get into your dominant team so far this season and really fantasy football in general, you have an interesting backstory, and I just want to sort of give you the floor to tell all our listeners sort of how you came to be at the position you are in your life today.
That's a long story. I don't want to bore your listeners. I have an unusual job. I get to, everyone who does fantasy are poets and writers and artists, right? That's who I'm talking to, isn't it? I've got a unique job. It doesn't really have anything to do with fantasy whatsoever. However, I am a writer. I do a lot of research and development, and part of what I do is take big risks, whether it's the WSOP or the big level of fantasy football, and see if I can hack it within a couple of years and try and figure out how to play at the highest level in the shortest amount of time. So for me, it's kind of been a 3-year journey with my son. He and I have been doing this now with my FFPC main event, and this year we're doing a little better than previous years. So we're having a really good time.
That's awesome.
So your book material is kind of writing itself here if you take the whole thing down.
Right.
That really would help. Yeah. No, it's been a fun journey. It doesn't always go well. I've had Cooper Kupp and the cloak of invisibility the last 2 weeks, so we never know when these things are going to change remarkably on us. But it's been a fun ride up to now. It's kind of this balance of sabermetrics and analytics with emotional intelligence, and how do we kind of read gut versus logic and balance for the best team. So I'm really exploring a lot of different angles in how this is put together, and having just a lot of fun learning about the details, the analytics behind what it takes to be a successful team, and then the velocity of decision making, especially at the live draft. That's in Vegas. That's insane. That's a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, I love the Vegas experience.
Yep, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about your team. I found your draft strategy to really be fascinating, but actually quite logical. You took a pair of running backs. You took Nick Chubb and Dalvin Cook, great picks both. But then you avoided running back for the next round 12 was the next time you took a running back. So tell us a little bit about that strategy.
Yeah, that was very fluid. I went in this year. I've always been big on running backs being the stable. This year was going in with the 0 RB philosophy, and really dialed in how I wanted to attack that. And when it got to me at slot 9, it just made sense that Chubb was the guy who I wanted for his ballistic upside. So I ended up going running back, and then realized it was the exact opposite of what my game plan was. And then so punted on all RBs and just stacked wide receivers from that point on. And my intent with Hunt in the 12th was just to handcuff to Chubb. So it was really kind of lock down those 2 running backs and then fill with wide receivers and tight ends from there on out, and then stack. So I wanted my quarterback. In this case, I always wanted Lamar Jackson. So I wanted to have a running quarterbacks, either Watson or Jackson. As a backup, maybe go Kyler Murray. But I got my first choice with Jackson late, and of course paired him with Waller, and it's been pretty successful all year long.
Talking with Erik Wahl, the second-place team in the FFPC main event, headed into the championship round here coming up in a couple of weeks. Erik, the roster that you have here for your runner-up in the regular season, it has it had 5 tight ends, Darren Waller, Mark Andrews, Jason Witten, Tyler Eifert, and Dallas Goddard. Then you went out and added a 6th one in Ross Dwelly this week. Why did you decide to stockpile this particular position for the stretch run?
It was defensive. The guy I was playing against was he needed points, and so I had to kind of choose who to take from him. Was I going to take Scarborough or Williams or the tight end for Dwelly, the stand-in 1-week tight end slot for San Fran in case Kittle was out? And I thought that was probably the biggest upside that I wanted to take away from him. I'd give him 3 yards in cloud of dust with the other guys. I think he picked up Scarborough. I'm not sure. No, I got Scarborough. He took Williams maybe. But it was all defensive. I didn't need any of those players. I was just blocking opponents and grabbing them.
Oh, that's very mean of you.
I would say,
well, it's very smart. It's very smart.
It's strategic, and the unique thing, the cool thing about FFPC is, and I think better than any other format, is the tight end advantage, the 1.5 PPR, because that makes this potentially the most valuable game-winning, game-changing position in the game. So I wouldn't mind having a situation where I'm actually going 4 tight ends. There are 3 tight ends with the 2 flexes there, and rotate those based on the best matchups. I happen to have some strong receivers that will probably take over that slot, but I'm good with my running backs as long as I can keep them healthy. But that's been a big thing. I've just dodged injury. That's so huge, is how can you get through in patchwork without getting bitten by the injury bug? And this team has dodged injury this far, so it's been profitable.
Oh, and not only that, too, Erik, but you look at your team, not only has it dodged injury, look at the value you got in the later rounds of the tight end position. Darren Waller has been a beast, at least for the first half of the season. He was one of the best tight ends out there. He slacked off a little bit, still putting up numbers. And then Mark Andrews, a guy, again, who crushed it the first part of the season, still doing very well. When you can wait on that position, especially in this tight end premium format, and you get it right, and those guys don't get hurt, it's such a massive advantage, which I think you've been enjoying here these last few weeks for sure.
It doesn't suck. Yeah, no, I love being able to play big tight ends. Those are guys that I wanted. I do a couple of what I did this year is I did 3 kind of mock drafts with the smaller FFPC, just kind of piece myself, get myself in position, and then my son and I drafted a team together, and then with this one. So I had a couple of mock drafts coming in, so I realized particularly guys that I really, really wanted, like Waller and Andrews, we're going way higher than I originally thought. And so tight ends went fast, and so I had to sprint on them early. And I just knew from previous drafts earlier in the weeks and months leading up to that the guys that I wanted were going earlier than usual, so I had to jump on them early. And they ended up all working out with the exception of Trey Burton, who I actually thought was going to be the big ticket item. He's been such a dud, I couldn't believe it. I really thought he was going to be a better tight end this year.
Yeah, Trey Burton's been disappointing.
And now he's on IR.
Ever since he came over. No, that's all right.
Yeah.
You can't get them all right.
No, you cannot. You cannot.
So let's talk wide receiver a little bit. You have Tyler Lockett, who's currently actually, I just looked on footballguys.com. They have him ranked 13th this week in PPR. He's on your bench right now, despite facing one of the worst secondaries in the NFL in Philly, probably partially due to your great tight ends. Do you think you'll be able to find a spot in your starting lineup for Lockett, or is he going to have to kind of ride the pines still a little bit coming off that injury?
Yeah, for me, it's between him and Lockett and Kupp. Nice choice to have. I'm just miffed by Kupp's zeros that have been thrown up. I think this will be a new week because they have the full stable. I'll probably find a spot for both. I love Lockett. I love the way that Russell force feeds him the ball, and he seems to have a catch radius that pulls everything down, even despite his small size. But I love the dude. I'd love to play Lockett. I really have an embarrassment of riches. I love the choices that I have to choose from, and I'm fortunate to be there. But I would say Lockett will end up in the starting lineup. I just have to pick who am I going to not start that week, this week.
Yeah, it's frustrating too. And we always talk about having options, and it's good when injuries set in, especially when we come up towards the end of the season. But oftentimes, Dave, I think you brought this up. So tough to get that optimal lineup up there every week when you have this talented of a squad.
It is tough when you have that talented of a squad. Fortunately, my teams this year have not been any good. So
right.
now it's just like desperation time. So But it's funny, Eric, and you're very modest about it. But I mean, if your team is totally stacked, it's you just have to kind of you set your lineup the best you can. You make your decision, and kind of like playing if you're playing poker. Sometimes the cards go your way, sometimes they don't.
It is. It's cross your fingers and hope, and you look at those defenses, you look at the DB's matchups, and I actually, anytime I can avoid Jalen Ramsey, I will. And that's just a gut feel, even if it's, Amari Cooper like this upcoming week and other teams, I'll probably be sitting him. There's just certain things that I have a gut feel about that I like to dodge, and gut and logic kind of mixed together, but I think there's a lot of luck in there also.
Yeah, certainly that's going to play a part in it. But listen, as long as you can prepare yourself and put yourself in the best position to win, that's all you can ask for. The ball's going to bounce where it's going to bounce. Erik Wahl joining the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour tonight. He is the runner-up in the 2019 FFPC main event regular season points competition. Let's talk about we kind of touched on this earlier with the Patriots receivers, Erik. Tom Brady was complaining about the offense needing to be better earlier this week. Mohamed Sanu, it doesn't look like he's going to play. Philip Dorsett's actually, it's looking a little bit better for him right now, for him to be out there against the Cowboys this week. You look at the rest of the Patriots receivers other than Julian Edelman, there's N'Keal Harry, there's Jacoby Myers. Are any of these guys sneaky starts for Week 12, or should fantasy overs not overthink it? Start Edelman, sit the rest of the guys. How do you look at this?
Start Edelman, sit the rest. I've got Brady as a backup, but he's just purely that. He's the GOAT in real life, but for me, he's never going to see the field as long as I have Lamar Jackson. So if he goes down with an ankle injury, maybe Brady will see the field and try and pitch to some of those second-tier receivers. But no, I don't have a lot of interest in any of New England outside of Edelman. I've got
a question from the chat.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've left Rex Burkhead on my lineup and held on to him, even though he's done nothing. I'm just waiting for Sony Michel to fumble and be in Belichick's doghouse again, because I think Burkhead will then get a few more runs. But I'm going to have to probably drop him soon if I can't get Sony in the doghouse.
Erik, we got a question in the chat room. Waska, our resident Ivy League professor here, he wants to know if David Montgomery is going to pay off in the Football Guys playoffs. And David Montgomery is an interesting guy because he really rose up draft boards those last 2-3 weeks of the drafting season headed into early September. And he's been kind of hit or miss and mostly miss in that offense. And this is after they cut Mike Davis, too, so it's really him and Tariq Cohen back there. Is he the type of guy that is going to – could you see him turning it on these last few weeks, or are we going to see more of what we've seen from Montgomery throughout the rest of the season of him just underperforming and not getting it done for fantasy owners?
Yeah, for me, that's coach's decision. I feel like he's got all the talent in the world. They don't have the game plan nor the quarterback to kind of create what they need. I've been disappointed with him because I think he's an explosive athlete, but I think Tariq Cohen's probably the money guy because I like the PPR and the potential just solid points there. If it was a dynasty league, yeah, I think he's going to be great in the long haul, but he needs a better offensive line and a better quarterback to develop any sort of RPO to make his running effective.
Offensive line is really bad in Chicago, Dave. That's something I should have brought up. It's terrible. That's why. I mean, like with Cohen, when I drafted him late this year, I didn't necessarily care about the offensive line as much because he's like a space back, so he doesn't necessarily need those holes to be blown open. Montgomery kind of does at this point in his career, and if you drafted him, you've probably been pretty upset. Maybe I should throw out some dynasty offers for him in some of my leagues, see if I can get him on the cheap.
Go for it.
Think it'll work or no?
Yeah,
it might.
What would you honestly? Would you? Yeah, exactly. Would you give up a first-rounder for David Montgomery right now?
Would I?
Yeah.
I would personally not.
It's kind of borderline right now. Some people probably would.
If I'm swinging for the fences in Dynasty, sure. It depends on what my first round they're looking for, but I like the upside of him. I just don't know what the future is in Chicago. I'd like to see a different quarterback, and I'd like to see more progressive in a positive direction, but I like him as an athlete. He's the type of person I like to bet big on. I like the explosiveness of the Chubbs and the Cooks and the Montgomerys of the world, but they need help to truly open up those holes. I think that's just bottom line for those guys.
All right, let's stay in the same division, same position, and we're going to go from the top of the draft all the way to the bottom because Bo Scarborough was drafted in the 7th round. Then he's been kind of going on practice squads and banning about.
He's bounced around.
Yes, now he's on Detroit. He's starting, former Alabama running back. He had 14 carries for 55 yards, 3.9 yards per carry, 1 touchdown, no targets, no receptions. And I don't think he was ever a pass-catching back really at Alabama. So what do you think about Scarborough? Do you think he could be, let's say, top 30 running back the rest of the way with mostly rushing yards and TDs?
I'd say no, not without Stafford. I think he's going to be okay. They don't have anyone else there, so they have to give it to somebody. So he's a nice patch plug and play for here on out because he's the only guy. But I'm not big on him. He seems like more 3 yards in a cloud of dust. It would be nice if he had Kerryon Johnson upside to explode for some long runs, big games. But I don't see it happening for Detroit. I'd love for him to prove me wrong because I think I've picked him up in a few different leagues.
Eric, what somebody might be facing this decision. Maybe they got Kelsey on bye or Hunter Henry on bye. They got to go with somebody else at tight end. Who would you rather start if you had to make this choice in the main event league playoffs? If your only two other choices at tight end were Jacob Hollister, who this week goes on the road to face that Philadelphia secondary, and then Noah Fant would be the other option here. Fant is going to be he's at Buffalo this week. So if you had to play one of those two guys at tight end this week, which one would it be?
Hollister, no question. Noah Fant's the better athlete, but again, you got that force-feeding situation with Russell Wilson, who loves the tight end game since Will Dissly went down. He's been looking for somebody. Hollister seems to be sort of fitting that mold, fitting that role. I like the upside for Hollister from here on out. I think, again, for Dynasty, Noah Fant's great athlete. I think his upside as a huge tight end will be big, but not with the current offensive situation. I'd rather go with money in the bank with Hollister and Russell Wilson.
Hollister's going to be an interesting guy in 2020 drafts next year, Dave. If Seattle doesn't really address the tight end position, he's already showing his chemistry with Russell Wilson.
Well, they have Dissly coming off IR.
Well, yeah, but this is a guy. Dissly, he always seems to get hurt too. Going back to his college days, this is just one of those things. I guess maybe you won't draft him as a starter, obviously, but in like a DE as your third tight end or something like that, he could be interesting in 2020.
Yeah, it depends on what they're saying about the two guys.
Right, exactly. Let's talk about. By the way, we're talking with Erik Wahl, the runner-up in the FFPC main event regular season tonight. We want to talk fantasy here, but I think it can apply to other things in life too.
Yeah, so I think we're going to get a little philosophical.
Yeah, sure. Let's get philosophical.
Given your line of work, your writing, and everything that the events have created, what you're doing, what have you learned in your life that has helped you be a better fantasy football player, and how could some of us as players kind of learn from that?
Well, a couple things. Number one, fantasy football is like a secret language. It's a secret code that wherever I'm performing all around the country, I know a lot about. Wherever I'm traveling, wherever I'm speaking in front of, I know about their team. I know who they're playing. I can speak their language at a very high level, and that usually catches people off guard, that I'm able to know that intricately about their sport, their team, their guys. So it's like a secret language that we have that is very useful for building relationship and connection. It's also, and I've got a son at Berkeley. He's a senior at Berkeley, and he and I have been doing this together since he was little, and this is kind of our thing. So a lot of father-sons will fish or they'll camp. We do fantasy football, and we stay in touch routinely throughout the week as we're talking about free agency, as we're talking about potential. It's a lot of fun that has been father-son bonding at the highest level. So both as in my business, my line of work, and building authenticity and connection with audiences, it's a secret language. I don't do it overtly, but if you slide in little subtle tones here and there, it catches people off guard, and I love it as a communicator, as a tool. Then I love the analytics of it, that this cross between what I would call sabermetrics and Billy Bean, and how he's brought this down to almost an automated, artificially intelligent program for the human performance, but it doesn't account for heart or will or emotion. And that's where I think a lot of people get this wrong. After Billy Bean, traded away all these mathematical guys and got the mathematical guys and gave away Yanni Cespedes, he gave away the heartbeat of the team and ended up losing because there's that human will, that human heart cannot be measured in analytics or on paper. It's only what is in the moment. And that's what I love about this, is just that dynamic tension between kind of sabermetrics and the analytics and logic of what should happen, and then what really will happen because of human emotion, because of all the elements that take place on the football field that you can't capture on paper. I really like that element of the tension between the both, emotion and analytics.
And Erik, you bring that up too, and I think this is interesting. Is that the biggest challenge that fantasy football players, whether just a casual player or a high stakes player, is that the biggest challenge you face, sort of balancing analytics and then bringing in the human element into it, knowing that these are real people. They're not numbers. They're not statistics. You have to sort of meld those together, and I feel like sometimes, and you can feel free to disagree with me, but I feel like the players that can successfully balance that out and understand the relationship between those two elements, those are usually, by and large, the more successful players year after year.
There are, and there's players that have heart and play with reckless abandon, a la Marshawn Lynch, who ran violently every single time he carried the ball. You just felt good about him being in the backfield, and then you guys have that are more passive. And though they might have good numbers, I like to go for the guys who are with reckless abandon, moving the ball north and south.
Kalen Balaj.
Man, there you go. Yes, exactly. Kalen Balaj. Erik, we got a couple of emails here that I wanted to read from listeners that had some questions for you. The first one's from Vic. He's in Houston. Greetings, Erik. A lot of us HSFF owners consider fantasy football a science. Well, this is sort of kind of what I just asked you. Consider fantasy football a science that you can excel at by knowing how to crunch the numbers. How is it an art form to you, and how do you use that approach to your advantage? That is Vic in Houston. Thank you for the email, Vic.
Well, and one way, and this wouldn't be directly to what happens on the field, but in Houston, he's got Mattress Mac. So we've got guerrilla marketing here. You've got a dude who is betting millions of dollars on the Astros, and they may or may not win. They didn't, but he's run all the affection of everyone, not only in Houston and their marketing business, but everyone around the world. So it's attention arbitrage. Is fantasy football ends up being potentially one of those things that could be a marketing tool for someone's business in some way, like Mattress King in Houston showcase. So it's got a lot of different facets that I think are cool elements that haven't been totally exposed yet. When I played in the WSOP, many of the players there were sponsored by companies. So they would get these math geniuses to sit at the table, 21, 22, 23 years old, poker geniuses, and all they did was wear the sponsorship of the companies that they were playing for, representing, in hopes that they were going to get to the final table. So I just saw the marketing side of that as very curious. Mattress King did it in Houston. I just like that idea as connecting various different guerrilla marketing tactics to see if there's more to fantasy football than just fantasy and making up stuff in our head. Is there ways to make this applicable? Is there things in life, in decision making, in trusting our gut, in not giving in to cognitive biases or false narratives because the media is saying one way, or I like the human element of being able to create my own story within the larger media and sports personality narratives.
Lot to unpack here, and I wish we had more time because I really like to explore this more. But I have to move on to the next email. Chris in Detroit. He writes, "What's up, Erik?" More traditional question here. First round of the playoffs, would you start Baker Mayfield against the Dolphins this week over Tom Brady against Dallas, or should I go with old reliable? Thanks for the email. That's Chris in Detroit. Now, Erik, you already said you got Brady. He's on your bench, locked on your bench because you got Lamar Jackson. But what if your other choice is Baker Mayfield? Which one would you be doing? Would you go with Tom Brady here against the Cowboys, or is Baker Mayfield's matchup too good to pass up?
Yeah, I'm all over Baker Mayfield. Again, maybe people might not like his style. I like that for fantasy that he's a loudmouth, that he wants the ball, that he's going to make things happen. Miami's got a crappy defense. I think him pushing the ball, I like Baker Mayfield a lot this week. Plus, he can run. I think that's a key. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe Brady will throw for 4 touchdowns. He could. I don't see it. I see Brady being conservative. I see Dallas being tough. I see maybe a touchdown or 2 from Brady, but possible upside, greater upside from Mayfield with running as well. And I like his heart.
Dave, if those are your two choices, you'd be playing Mayfield over Brady this week?
Yeah, I guess I'd have to, just because the matchup is so nice.
Yeah, a reluctant. Well, I mean, he is at home too, for what it's. I guess they're both at home, but still, Mayfield at home against the hapless Dolphins. I mean, come on, you got to go that way when it comes down to it.
Yeah, Dallas's pass defense is pretty solid too, actually, and they always have them.
Yeah, their secondary this year is really opened my eyes quite a bit. Erik's been very gracious with his time, Dave. Before we let him go.
All right, we could need some help here. We were looking for a play. We always ask this stupid question because we love it.
Not a stupid question. We learn a lot from this question.
It's awful. Can you give us a player that a lot of FFPC players will be starting, but who you would consider benching in Week 12, as well as a sleeper that should really actually be started?
Ooh, I think. Well, I'd say Amari Cooper. I dislike his matchup. I mean, if you've got options, I'd go a different way. They seem to be going Gallup and tight ends and spreading the ball around more there. So I would maybe consider benching. I'm sorry. Amari Cooper. Did I say Michael Irvin? Amari Cooper.
No, you said
and
Cooper.
Who would I start?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I like Hollister. I do think that Russell gonna force feed that ball. So I would go with Hollister as my. Is that considered a long shot? Is that considered sneaky enough to fall into that category?
Qualify.
I think that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think so. I think that's sneaky enough. And I mean, how many people
Okay,
you think about these teams that are in the playoffs right now? I mean, how many of them are relying on Jacob Hollister? I mean, that you'd have to be super dominant at running back and receiver to not have a strong tight end at this point. So I think Hollister is a very interesting guy. And when you consider the matchup, it's the perfect combo. I think that makes a lot of sense to start Hollister this week. And I think a lot of people probably, when it comes down to it, they'll realize the smart decision probably is starting him. Smart decision was
Can we give? Does Erik have anything he wants to?
Oh yeah, Erik. Is there anything
can we buy anything from you?
Yes. How can people enjoy more of what you have to offer?
Oh man, I appreciate you guys asking. I've sort of been on sabbatical from promoting my business that I've loved growing for the last 15 years. I've kind of quietly just been writing and doing research and development. So I'm not in the promotion stage, but I'm loving the opportunity to chat with you guys, to chat football. I don't need any directing to my website. I just love the opportunity to be a part of what you guys are doing. I think it's a lot of fun. And for us, it's been a big part of our family bonding. My wife actually roots as hard for our team, our family, our tribe, and our fantasy as anything else. So it's been family bonding to participate in this fantasy football journey together. So I don't know how many guys out there are battling with their spouses, their kids for time. Man, make it a family event. Pull everyone together and get everyone rooting on the same page because it's a lot of fun. We're really enjoying it.
Erik, it sounds like you really have a special relationship with your family. I was having dinner with my wife tonight, and I was trying to tell her all about my dynasty teams and lineup decisions. And she wasn't having anything of it. Yeah. I'm not sure I understand what the deal is.
It's a slow milking process. My wife didn't understand any of it at first now, but she knows a lot of the nuances. She knows when Hopkins' mom gets the ball or not, and if that's good. So we appeal to the emotional side of the game.
All right, I'll keep working on her.
Erik, before I let you go, Kern Reeve, I mentioned him before, he's a professor at Cornell. He says if you ever make it out to Vegas for the live events at the FFPC.
He was out, wasn't he?
You were at Vegas last year, Erik?
I've been the last 3 years. I
didn't even realize. Okay.
I have another team that's also moving on. That's I think they finished 140th or something like that, but they're moving on. That's the one with my son. So we did that draft live in Vegas, and I'd say that's the real thrill. That's the most exciting part of the entire year. But if anyone hasn't done that, I realize it's not cheap, but it is, man, it's worth it for us. And like I said, family bonding for my son and I to be sitting shoulder to shoulder with 11 other guys with the velocity of decision making and going on there. That was, like I said, that's father-son bonding at its finest.
Well, Hudson Reeves says he would love to buy you a beer and have a discussion with you out in Vegas. He said he thinks you are very cool. He is checking the the like box for you. Yes, a philosophical discussion with you out in Vegas. So there you go.
Nice.
Eric, listen, it's been a treat having you on the show tonight. I really appreciate it. Dave really appreciates it. Our listeners really appreciate it. We'll follow you on Twitter at Erik Wahl. Check out everything that you have coming down the pike there. Certainly appreciate you making some time tonight. And good luck the rest of the way, dude. I hope the ball bounces your way. This will make for a fascinating book someday if you're cashing a $500,000 grand prize in a month.
Podcast will be part of it. Thanks for encouraging me. Thanks for letting me be a part of this, and just give you guys a high five as well. That you guys, all the hard work and what you're doing to put this together. This has made the last several months and our family. It's given us a lot of good time. So thanks for what you guys have done as well. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, dude. Appreciate that. Happy early Thanksgiving to you and yours, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good, guys. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Erik Wahl. Follow him on Twitter at Erik Wahl. TheArtOfVision.com. Really great story of him. And I know he didn't want to get into it tonight, but if you go on his website, there's a lot of good stuff there. Has his own Wikipedia page, Dave. I don't know if I told you that before, but you can get some information on him there.
Yes, if you went into stalking, yes, you can do all that.
He wrote a book 6 years ago called Unthink that really crushed it on the bestseller list.
Oh, cool.
So that's probably the one that you want to check out first. He's written several books.
I can do something on Kindle.
There you go.
A book for my Kindle.
There you go. He brings up this whole family aspect of fantasy football.
Sure.
My wife could not care less about it, and I've tried to talk to her about it. I was waking her up, when Kurt was winning Kentucky a couple of years ago. Yeah. She was in bed. I'm like, Crabtree just drafted another one. Alshon Jeffrey can't catch up and she's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And I said it was a big deal. And my wife actually left tonight she gets on a flight tomorrow, 5:45 a.m., going out on a cruise. So this whole week, Dave.
Is this the summer of
It's the autumn of Jennifer, and I am watching
the Thanksgiving of Balky.
The Thanksgiving of Balky, and what's funny is I have a birthday coming up on Sunday, and as she was leaving the house tonight, I said, "Honey, just think when you get back from your cruise, you'll be married to a 40-year-old," and the life just sunk right out of her. Her shoulders slumped, and she's like, it's the most depressing thing I could say to her as she was leaving the house tonight.
That's too funny.
But I am looking forward to spending the week with just me and my kids. Yeah. And my son, I think, is really starting to get into just sports and understanding competition, a little bit. And let me tell you, he is quite the odds maker when it comes to point spreads.
Oh, really?
He's on a hot streak.
Sweet, he's killing it.
Yeah, he is. He's doing very well.
Tell him to start tweeting it. L'Oreal will start betting it.
Oh, I'm going to start posting it in our little group chat because he was dead on the. He said that Wisconsin Badgers. I can't remember. They're playing some Little Sisters of the Poor team, and he's like, yeah, they're going to win by 18. They won by 20.
Really?
I mean, it was pretty crazy. And this is not the only one he's done. I got to ask him what his Packers 49ers pick this week. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the emails here tonight. First one is from Bill in St. Clairsville, Ohio. I was hoping you could help me out with a tough football guys lineup decision I have this week. No Tyreek Hill for my playoff team, so I have to decide between Michael Gallup against the Pats or F1 McLaurin taking on the Lions at home. Thanks, guys. That is Bill in St. Clairsville, Ohio. Okay, no pressure, Dave, but this dude doesn't have Tyreek Hill, and he's trying to move on to the football guys playoffs. Let's try not to lead him astray. Are you liking McLaurin better this week, or is the play Michael Gallup?
I just think it's so tough to bench Gallup. He's been so hot lately, and McLaurin has been more up and down. I think I would just have there'd be so much regret by not starting Gallup if he had a big game.
Dallas's offense looks pretty good.
Yeah, I mean,
Washington's offense
threw for 444 yards last week.
Right. Washington's offense is an undeniable train wreck.
Yeah, who's the better quarterback throwing?
Dak Prescott.
Of course, by a ton.
Did you see the video clip of Dwayne Haskins talking to his offensive lineman?
Oh, no.
They were down quite a bit. Haskins had like 4 passing yards in a quarter and a half. His offensive linemen were all sitting in a circle after a series, and Haskins came over to him, and he was making this impassioned plea, and finally he just said, he's like, what do you want from me? Like, what can I do for you is basically what, and these guys are like openly kind of snickering. Yeah. Look, I'm like, this is.
Like, I don't know, play good.
Oh, so terrible. That just. So
yeah, I'll take the guy who threw for 444 yards versus the 4 yards.
Can I bring up one more aspect? And I think Erik actually alluded to this. Amari Cooper, probably going to get shadow cover from Stephon Gilmore, who's going to be a Pro Bowl cornerback this week.
Sure.
Michael Gallup will not. And so I think that's going to open some stuff up for him. So I think it's pretty clear Gallup over McLaurin.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, moving on to Keith in Granite Falls, North Carolina. Who would you play this week between Ronald Jones and Miles Sanders, gentlemen? To give you a little bit of background on this, Dave, Ronald Jones is at Atlanta this week, and Miles Sanders is at home against the Seattle Seahawks.
Well, for me, I know they declared Ronald Jones a starter, but he's not putting up trustworthy numbers. He
didn't last week.
He's not putting up trustworthy numbers, is what I said.
The previous 2 weeks before that, he was a slam dunk start.
Yeah.
Last week it was rough.
Last week I think he only was on the field for 31% of the snaps. Dare Ogunbowale. He was
former
on the
Badger,
field
by
for
the way.
more than Ronald Jones was. And Sanders is getting more action. I mean, Howard might play, but I trust Sanders more than I trust Rojo at this point.
Jordan Howard, I think, is.
But even when Ronald Jones had fantasy points when he had that 8 for 83 receiving game, but it's not like he was rushing 17 for 100. He's just.
I guess my point is he doesn't have to when he's. What was the big question coming in to his NFL career? Can he catch passes? Well, I think he is showing that he can.
Yeah, but then last week he didn't. And he didn't get targeted.
That was a one-off.
Or targeted much. I don't really know.
No, I'm defending Ronald Jones here, Dave, but I actually agree with you. I think Miles Sanders is the play over Ronald Jones this week at home against Seattle. As you like to say, Miles Sanders is going to be sleeping in his own bed Saturday night. It's just one of those things. So I'm with you on that.
Also,
I don't expect much from Jordan Howard or Jay Ajayi. Go ahead.
Atlanta's defense is really coming on strong right now.
Oh, my God. It's like they realize their coach is on the brink of being fired.
They've crushed their last two opponents. I actually this is my pick of the week is Atlanta minus the points against Tampa. So I already set that one to Farrell. My pick last week also won, by the way.
Is this for the Super Contest?
No, I just each week I've been giving him a pick. Been actually hitting most of them.
Atlanta 3.5-point favorites at home against Tampa. That is a 51.5 total on that game. Should be interesting. I need Mike Evans for a big game there, and Godwin, quite frankly. You know what? I need everybody from Tampa, Ronald Jones included. But yeah, Sanders is the play for me. All right, moving on. I got one more email here, and then we're going to get it. No, I don't have any more emails. Let's get into some fun, Dave. Are you ready for some fun?
Sure, I like to have fun.
This is good. Now, now you have expressed off the air that you don't care for these games that we play.
It's fine.
Okay, no, but you've said this before. So I decided, I know Dave doesn't like these, so I'm going to do not one but two of them tonight.
Great.
We're going to do two games. Now, the first game, this is going to help some people, I think, in their flex spot for FFPC this week. Or maybe I don't want to reveal it. I have the Browns target leaders over the last 2 weeks. Granted, small sample size, but these 2 weeks are significant, which you're going to find out after this, okay? The Browns target leaders over the last 2 weeks, 22, 17, and 17 for their top 3 pass catchers. I need you to tell me who the 22 is and who the 2 17s are. This is Browns targets over the last 2 weeks. So weeks 10 and weeks 11. Any guesses?
I'm going to say Landry is 22.
Landry's actually 17. Okay.
When did Kareem Hunt come back?
Kareem Hunt came back week 10.
Okay, so I'll go Kareem Hunt 22.
He's actually the 17, which is the point I wanted to bring up, that here you have.
So ODB?
ODB is 22.
All right.
But I think the point is, and this is what we should get into, Kareem Hunt, and I'm going to ask you one more final guess on this. Kareem Hunt, 17 targets since he's come back, Dave. And guess what running back he ranks as in those 2 weeks since he's come back for fantasy points?
This is just a pure guess. I'll go 6.
16. He's running back 16, which
right.
He's not an RB1, but still startable.
Good, yeah.
Clearly startable. So my point to you is, and I'm going to pose this to you right now, Kareem Hunt, is he a must-start this week? He gets Miami at home. I almost think you have to play him, even though Nick Chubb is healthy.
The only fear is if they jump out to a huge lead, they're not passing very often because they don't need to. But a lot of times that fear is overstated because the games stay pretty close into the third quarter.
And consider Freddie Kitchens. I mean, is there going to be a blowout with him?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and so even if it's like 28 to 3 in the late third, they'll still be running their regular base offense. So, I think he's a really good option.
I think you got to find a way to get him in your lineups this week. I really do. I think that this is a guy. I mean, even if he doesn't find the end zone, he should put up double digits for you. So I think he's a guy that you got to look at. All right, now here's the fun one. You get 8 guesses at this, but you got to get 5 right. Okay. So it's 3 strikes and you're out.
So I get 8 total guesses.
8 total guesses,
right.
And you tell me who this is the top 5 players in the NFL, the most targets since week 8. Week 8, week 9, week 10, week 11, okay? Who's the top 5 in the NFL in targets?
So I have to get all 5?
Well, you're going to get all 5. You have to get all 5, but you get 8 guesses at it, okay? Now, here's the other thing. I'm going to tell you this right now. I
have no shot at this, but go ahead.
There is probably only – I don't think there's any first-round picks on this list, fantasy first-round picks. There's probably 2 fantasy second-round picks and then a cavalcade of other stuff on here. This will be a challenge.
Okay. So there's no fantasy first.
Like Juju Smith-Schuster, Julio Jones.
I understand what that.
Okay, all right.
So Michael Thomas, though, is not one of them?
That is right. So and that doesn't count as a guess. He is actually not on this list.
So this is top 5, and these are receivers or anything?
They're anything, but I'll tell you right now, they're all receivers at the top 5.
Dude, I have no shot at this. I really don't.
All right.
Mike Evans.
Mike Evans is number 2 on this list with 42 targets since week 8. So good job there. I'm going to give you hints on these other guys.
On all of them?
Well, I'll give you hints on some. I'll wait to give you a hint until you get one wrong.
Let me screw up a little bit here. Week 8, so DJ Chark.
Chark is not one of these guys, although you got the DJ part right.
DJ Moore
is number 1, Dave.
Nice.
He is leading the NFL in targets since week 8 with 45. He's been awesome. And he really has been. Like
that's great. We've been hyping him for a long time.
My hint was going to be hype. I was going to say because he was our hype man. He's our preseason hype man.
He hasn't been getting any touchdowns, but man, with all those targets, and he's catching 8 or 9 balls.
I was going to say like 8 for 90, pretty consistently. That guy is going to go way up on draft boards next year.
Deservedly so.
And we'll see what they do at quarterback next year. But this is with a backup quarterback throwing to him, and it's not just empty targets. He's doing stuff with them too. He's been awesome. All right, so you have 1 and 2 on this list. The other 3 of these guys, Dave, you got the 2 NFC guys. The other 3 guys in this list, all in the AFC and all in separate divisions. One is in the AFC East, one's in the AFC Central, one's in the AFC West.
East, Central.
There is nobody in the AFC South on this list.
West. Okay.
And we've already talked about.
So I'm going to have to go with Edelman for the AFC East.
Edelman's not on here. But there's a. I shouldn't even say this. There's a black Edelman on this list, and a guy that we just recently talked about. He is facing his old team this week. Team that traded him for a couple of third-round picks, if I remember correctly, fairly recently.
I'm drawing a blank. So I don't know.
He was. I'll give you a hint. He was on the last list we talked about, the list we talked about prior to this, as far as Browns target leaders over the last 2 weeks.
So Jarvis Landry?
He is number 3 on this list.
Oh, I thought you were still talking about AFC East.
No, this is the AFC Central. I'm sorry. The number 4 is the AFC East. Okay, I'll give you a hint on this guy.
All right, let me try the AFC West. Cortland Sutton?
It's not Cortland Sutton.
Shoot.
This is a guy.
I lost.
Oh, that's right. That's okay. So
too bad.
All right, so I'm going to give you hints that are going to give it away. The AFC West guy is a guy you own on a ton of dynasty teams, I believe. You are a big fan of his.
Tyreek Hill.
It is Tyreek Hill. He's number 5 with 38. And this guy, the guy who's number 4 on this list, I hesitate to call him a league winner, Dave, and I would have to check Fantasy Mojo to find out when this guy was drafted. He had to be like in the 30s and 40s.
John Brown?
John Brown, number 4 on this list with
John
40.
Brown, actually, but I didn't say it.
So most targets since week 8. Great. So it's basically last month. DJ Moore, Mike Evans, Jarvis Landry, John Brown, Tyreek Hill. And I'd be willing to wager that a lot of the teams playing to get to their league championship this week have a lot of these guys on their roster. I know I do. And John Brown has been awesome. I was actually, to give you a teaser on the Tom Greenwald RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. I can't remember if I've talked to you about this in person or not. As far as draft strategy goes, I did 0 RB in 2 leagues. I did 0 RB in 1 league in 2017, 1 league in 2018. By far and away my best teams those 2 years. So this year I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to go 0 RB on as many drafts as I can. Now, there's a couple of drafts where I had the 2-second pick, and I couldn't really do it because I took either Barkley or McCaffrey. But I did not have a great year. I mean, it's okay, but it's not great.
Right.
And now I listen to these pundits out there and a lot of these podcasts and talk about if you went 0 RB, there's just nothing this year. You're probably hurting, which makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's fine, but I don't necessarily totally agree. But
you think there was running backs on the waiver wire this year? Because that's sort of what 0 RB is predicated on.
Not really. I mean, you could have drafted other, you could have drafted running backs that did fine.
Well, it like in round 6 on?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, just, like Royce Freeman's been okay. I mean,
like Miles Sanders, Sony Michel, Ronald Jones, those types of guys we're going round 6 on.
Yeah, I mean, Sony Michel is going a little earlier than that usually, but I mean,
yeah, I guess maybe.
I don't know.
All right, so here's the point I wanted to make.
Yeah,
I look at these teams, and I feel like I was really kind of squeezing everything I could at running back every single week, but I always seem to have that extra top 30 receiver on my roster. Like, I seem like I always had 5 top 30 receivers every week. So I think had I not been so stringent on 0 RB and drafted just one running back instead of one of those top receivers, and maybe it's just, and I'm not trying to brag, this is going to sound terrible, like maybe I'm just that good at finding receivers in the rough because I got John Brown in a lot of rosters.
Yeah, maybe you're better at receiver picking.
And maybe, but I feel like if I just would have flipped it out, I'd have a lot more teams in the playoffs this year. And I don't know if that's a one-off. I don't know what I'm going to do next year. We'll see how it goes. But I feel like I'm not going to be as married to 0 RB, and that might be a mistake. But
I think and that makes sense, and that's a good way to look back at the year a little bit. I think if you were looking at running back in the first like 3 or 4 picks, like you kind of said, and it makes sense, right?
Right.
And then I think just having the general philosophy of realizing how important wide receiver is, and kind of just leaning that direction most of the time. But let's say you pick 10 or something, you could go receiver, let's say. But all of a sudden, in the 3rd round, one of the guys, let's say you like Aaron Jones or Derrick Henry or something.
Right. Yep.
You're like, oh, you know what? Even though I'm leaning receiver, I'm going to take Jones here. I'm going to take Henry here. And then in the 4th round, again, just kind of looking at it, but more likely you'll go receiver unless you really see a value. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, and I really tried to get a top 3 tight end in all of my drafts too. That's like tight end premium, non-tight end premium. I always try to get that. And this year it was one of the top 3. I tried to get either Kittle, Ertz, or Kelsey.
Well, and the thing is that Kelsey has worked, but Ertz and Kittle have really not worked out.
Ertz is coming on a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, but he's had some terrible weeks, and Kittle's had some injuries. And then if you're waiting for the 4, 5, or 6 guys, you had Hunter Henry who was hurt for a long period of time. Ingram's been pretty much a bust, and then O.J. Howard's been god awful. If that's what it was.
I think you're dead on that. I'll tell you where the value was. The dudes who waited for Darren Waller.
Yeah,
the dudes who waited for Mark Andrews. Yeah. The dudes who waited for Austin Hooper. That's where the value was in tight end.
That's how it worked out this year. And each year is different, but so you just have to kind of predict, hope, pray. And see if you get the right guys.
Predict, hope, and pray is going to be one of my teams next year. Field Yates, by the way, from ESPN Fantasy, he believes, and he's sort of like an ESPN insider, Austin Hooper actually is a free agent after this year. Now, they could franchise him. If they don't, he expects Austin Hooper to be the highest paid tight end in NFL history after this season.
Really?
Yeah, that was his prediction.
Cornfin's Jeff Tirabassi have been trying to trade Hooper to me for like the first 7 weeks of the season because I had Hunter Henry.
Yeah.
And by the way, after Hawkinson, I might have told you, after Hawkinson had his breakout game, I tried to trade away Hunter Henry.
Oh, yeah.
Injured Hunter Henry and Ridley for Hawkinson. The trade got accepted, then overturned. I think we talked about it in the past.
Yeah,
anyway,
did. No, that's funny.
But so then Finns have been trying to sell me him for a 2020 first, and I kept on turning it down. Maybe I should have taken it, even with Henry coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
no,
stupid story. Who cares?
No, that was good. The first time I heard that, I'm like, oh, dude, how did he just decide?
He kept on offering.
He didn't want to do it anymore. No, it got overturned. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's like, it's like the lightning strike in a good way.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff on tonight's show. That's going to do it for it tonight. I want to thank Erik Wahl. Remember, check out his website, theartofvision.com, at Erik Wahl on Twitter, and then of course the book is Unthink. It came out 6 years ago, but stuff in there applies today, so check that out. I want to thank Dave Gerzak, the FFPC, Rob Bryce, and, of course, each and every one of you for tuning in this Friday night. And good luck in your Football Guys and FFPC main event playoffs, too. It's going to be a fun little weekend here in Week 12. Tom Greenwald is on the High Stakes Lowdown this week. Remember, rotoviz.com/podcast, also on Apple Podcasts as well. Next week, the fifth-place main event team owner, Josh Siegel, will be the High Stakes Lowdown guest. But on these airwaves, 10-9 Central, a Thanksgiving edition, Football Guys team owner who's 8th place right now headed into the championship round, Erik Sison, will be on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. That is next week. Good luck in your playoffs. Hopefully the ball bounces your way and your weekend officially starts
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. That was broadcast live and heard around the world. Erik and Dave will be back next week with more analysis, interviews, and advice from a guest much smarter than they are. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next week.
We're on the cement floor, even more so if we on tour. Me and E explore the country, wondering about the evening before. Trying to explain where the time went, while other rappers find a studio to grind in. Kinda like
I always talk about letting the listeners behind the curtain on this show, Dave. And I feel like we let them behind the curtain tonight, but the curtain of our fantasy teams this year, that we spent probably a good 4 or 5 minutes on drafting and drafting strategy. And I think that's just letting everybody know, yeah, our leagues didn't turn out the way we wanted this year. We already have an eye towards 2020.
Yeah, some are doing all right. I mean, they're not all dead in the water.
Right. No, that's true.
The Kentucky teams, you've got a couple of big paybacks in there. You've got plenty of playoff teams going on. So we're just not absolutely crushing it.
Yeah, no, that's true. And, well, I hope the ball bounces my way in these playoffs. We'll see what happens. I should also remember to everybody to mention Football Guys Football Guys Playoff Challenge and the world-famous FFPC Playoff Challenge live right now, myffpc.com. You can go get your teams set up for there right now, so when you can start filling out these rosters, you'll be ready to go. And I believe is there going to be an import function too?
Yeah, you can move teams. You can move teams from one to the other and so forth. We're down to 6,470 teams left out of 6,500.
Hustle up, people! It's going to be here before you know it. We'll talk to you again next week with Erik Sison. Thanks so much for listening. Good luck in your league playoffs, everybody.